Hey guys, we're gonna talk about pitches and how to change pitches on an instrument in this video. And there's really two main ways to do it. I could demonstrate it for you right now. Actually, we'll do that a little later. Uh, I'll demonstrate it a little later. We'll just say for now pitch and length of a string. If you shorten up a string, if you're playing air guitar, you go really close to your hand to demonstrate this short string, because short strings make a high pitch. And the other way is to increase the tension of a string. And in fact, if you see, that's what we'll do next, is tension and pitch. More tension, higher pitch, shorter length, higher pitch. Those are the two objectives of this video. But you need to be able to explain why those two things occur using this guy. The wave equation, you remember him. Alright? So you need to be able to use the wave equation to explain why pitch changes when you shorten length or when you increase tension. Alright. So shorter strings make a higher pitch. So another way we could say that is they make a higher frequency. In fact, alright? Now, because frequency and pitch are the same thing. Pitch is just what our mind does to interpret frequency. Why do shorter strings make a higher frequency and a higher pitch? Well, it really has to do with the fact that the wavelength changes when you shorten a string. The wavelength of that standing wave in the string changes. So if you start out with a long string, what you'd have is a stretched out wavelength here. I see two antinodes as a wavelength. This is the fourth harmonic in this example. And if you were to shorten up that string but stay on the fourth harmonic, you could see that the waves squish and the wavelength becomes smaller. Alright, so a smaller, shorter string has a smaller wavelength. Now, wavelength gets smaller, so frequency goes up. What doesn't change? The length of the string does not affect wave speed because wave speed depends on the medium. If you only shorten a string, you don't change the medium, so you don't change the wave speed. So wave speed does not change, wavelength does when you shorten the string. So let's kind of shift it over and see how that affects frequency. Here, okay? So we'll kind of do it like this. So wave speed here is constant. Make this little section for the wave equation. But inside the wave equation, when you have that longer string, what you have is that bigger wavelength. I'm going to say that goes up when you have a longer string, and therefore your frequency or your pitch goes down. The velocity holds constant, longer waves, lower frequency. And vice versa, when you shorten the string here, the shorter string next to that picture has a smaller wavelength. So as that goes down, the frequency or the pitch, that's the pitch, remember the frequency. Here the frequency and pitch goes up, here the frequency and pitch goes down inside your wave equation, but the reason is those two have to always multiply to equal that same wave speed if you don't change the string you're playing. Alright? So it's an inverse proportion right there. That's what it is. Okay. So let's look at tension and pitch. Oh, in fact, before we even do that, look at this. It's got a really cool example of pitch and length. Look at that. What is that? That's the inside of a piano. So why are we looking at this? Well, a piano is shaped the way it is, kind of like this, because a piano is really a stringed instrument. To the left are the low pitch, long strings you've got, and to the right are the high pitch, short strings. Alright, so these have tiny wavelengths and therefore higher frequencies or higher pitches, but the long strings have actually longer wavelengths. Right, so here's your long wavelengths are over there, right, basically. And here on this side is your short wavelengths, right? Short wavelengths, choppy, right? And here's your long wavelengths, like that, right? So these, just simply because they have a longer wavelength inside the actual string, it's a lower frequency, a lower pitch, and this is really choppy, kind of compressed waves inside that string, and you've got a higher pitch, a higher frequency. All right. So here's a good example: is a piano. All right. Now let's talk about tension and pitch. Let's give you an example of this. This is where I'll bring in the guitar a little bit, and we'll kind of do this sort of a thing. All right. Woo. Here, I'll show you the guitar. So, point it down, point it at the guitar, and right. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten the string and listen to the sound as it changes as I tighten the string. The pitch goes. What I'm doing is I'm taking this right here and I'm twisting it. As I twist that, I'm tightening the string, I'm tightening the tension right there on that knob in the string. And then the pitch goes up as the tension does. Now, why does that happen? We have to be able to explain it using the wave equation. So here's your notes to explain that using the wave equation. That is this guy right over here. How can we explain that? You know, sometimes, even another example is people bend strings on guitars, and that increases the tension too. But one important point to start with is, I know shortening the length shortens the wavelength, but when you change tension, you know, higher tension, higher pitch, but when you change tension, the wavelength stays constant. So tension does not change the string length. You know, if you bend the string, if you tighten it in any way, it doesn't change the string length. All right.
T-shirts are in. They can be picked up in room 233. Habitat for Humanity T-shirts can be picked up in room 233.
Very nice.
Will the following students please report to the general office? Cassandra Mulholland, Amanda Placencia, Olivia Laley, Mike Vandervork, Melissa Jones, Jamie Spinoza, Rich Huber, and Dominic Kernan. Ryan Ennis, report to the general office.
Alright, thanks for the interruption. That's great. Anyway, a higher tension does not change string length, and therefore does not change wavelength. You could just copy it down at this point.
Matt DeMarco, Sean Sprenger, Greg Spallos, Miranda Matasuski, and Zoltan Horvath to guidance.
Alright, good 2 minutes interruption. Just skip to there. So, the wavelength stays constant even though you make the string tighter. The reason why is because the length of the string really determines the wavelength. A longer string means a longer wavelength, as you remember. And the wavelength stays the same. Alright? What tension does is it changes the medium. A more tense or tightly connected medium, see my hands? That's tension right there. When it's more tightly connected, the wave speed increases because the medium determines the wave speed, as you remember. Alright, so a high tension means a high wave speed, but a low tension means a low wave speed. So we can make a big V here and a small one here. So how does that affect the right side of an equation? Well, it does not. If you don't change the length of the string, that stays constant. Y same length string. Alright? Then your wavelength stays constant. So the wavelength is not changed by the high or low tension. But what is changed is what you hear, which is the frequency or the pitch. So when there's a faster wave, you get more frequent waves and a higher pitch. And when there's low tension, very loosely connected, you get a low speed, which causes a direct proportion and a lower frequency heard. The wavelength, when you change tension, the wavelength never changes because the wavelength is dependent on the length of the string, and tension that's the other example, pitch versus string length. Tension does not affect the length of the string. Thanks for sticking with me through that interruption.